I love you, but there's something you should know. Before you hear anything else, before you jump to conclusions, before your mind starts filling in the blanks with fear, uncertainty, or doubt, stay with me. Because what you're about to hear is not what you expect. In fact, if you leave now, you'll miss the one truth that could completely change the way you see this connection forever. I know those words sound simple. I love you. People say them every day. They write them in messages. They whisper them before sleep. They repeat them until the words lose their weight. But this is different. Because when I say I love you, I am not talking about a temporary feeling. I am not talking about attraction. I am not talking about convenience. I am talking about something that survived distance, confusion, silence, mistakes, timing, and circumstances. And that's exactly why there's something you should know. Something I have carried for far longer than I should have. Something I never found the courage to say. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I was afraid of what would happen once the truth was finally spoken. You see, people think love begins when two people meet. But sometimes love begins long before that. Sometimes your heart recognizes someone before your mind understands why. Sometimes a person walks into your life and suddenly things feel familiar. Not familiar because you've seen them before. Familiar because a part of you has been waiting for them. And that's exactly what happened. The first time I noticed you, something felt different. I couldn't explain it. Nothing dramatic happened. The sky didn't open. Time didn't stop. There were no signs flashing in front of me. Yet something inside me quietly whispered, "Pay attention." And that whisper never left. Days passed. Weeks passed. Life continued. But somehow your presence stayed. Even during moments when you weren't around. Even during times when we barely spoke. Even when logic told me to move on. Something kept pulling me back. Not to obsession. Not to fantasy. To truth. A truth I wasn't ready to accept. Because accepting it meant admitting something terrifying. It meant admitting that you mattered. And once someone matters, everything changes. The risks become bigger. The fears become louder. The possibility of loss becomes real. That's when I started hiding things. Not from you. From myself. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself it would pass. I told myself it wasn't important. But every attempt to ignore it only made it stronger. And eventually I realized something shocking. The feelings weren't growing. They had always been there. I was simply running from them. Now here's the part nobody knows. The part I've never shared. The part that changes everything. There were moments when I almost walked away. Moments when I convinced myself that disappearing would be easier. Moments when I thought distance would solve everything. Because loving someone from afar is painful. Loving someone while carrying unanswered questions is painful. Loving someone while pretending you don't care is exhausting. So I tried to leave. More than once. But every time I did, life had a strange way of bringing me back. A random memory. A conversation. A reminder. A coincidence too perfect to ignore. And little by little I began to understand. Some connections refuse to be forgotten. Not because they're easy, but because they're real. And real things have a way of surviving, even when everything else falls apart. But that's not the secret. Not yet. The secret is bigger than that. The secret is that while everyone else was focused on what was happening on the outside, I was fighting a battle on the inside. Because there was something I feared you would discover. Something I thought would change the way you looked at me forever. I wasn't afraid of rejection. That would have hurt. But I could have survived it. What terrified me was being misunderstood. Because there is a huge difference between being rejected for who you are and being rejected for who people think you are. For a long time, I believed I had to be perfect. Perfect timing. Perfect words. Perfect circumstances. Perfect version of myself. I thought love required perfection. Then one day life taught me something unforgettable. Love doesn't grow in perfection. Love grows in truth. And truth is messy. Truth is uncomfortable. Truth doesn't always arrive wrapped in confidence. Sometimes truth arrives shaking. Sometimes truth arrives scared. Sometimes truth arrives with tears in its eyes. But truth arrives anyway. And mine has finally arrived. I love you. But there's something you should know. The person you've seen is only part of who I am. The smiles you've witnessed are real. But so are the scars. The strength you've noticed is real. But so are the insecurities. The confidence you've seen is real. But so are the nights I doubted everything. I have fought battles you never knew existed. I have smiled through storms I never talked about. I have carried pain while pretending everything was fine. And if I am being completely honest, there were moments when I felt unlovable. Moments when I wondered if anyone could truly understand me. Moments when I questioned whether I deserved the kind of connection my heart wanted. That's what you should know. Not because I want sympathy. Not because I want attention. Because if love is going to mean anything, it must be built on honesty. And honesty requires courage. So here it is. I am not perfect. I never was. I never will be. But every feeling I have for you is real. Every hope is real. Every fear is real. Every dream is real. And every heartbeat behind these words is real. But the story goes deeper. Much deeper. Because there's another truth. A truth that took me years to understand. Sometimes the greatest obstacle to love isn't another person. It's ourselves. The walls we build. The fears we protect. The stories we tell ourselves. The belief that happiness belongs to everyone except us. I lived inside those walls. For longer than I care to admit. I convinced myself that wanting something made me weak. I convinced myself that vulnerability was dangerous. I convinced myself that silence was safer than honesty. But silence has a cost. A cost nobody talks about. The cost of wondering what could have happened. The cost of never knowing. The cost of carrying unsaid words until they become emotional weight. And eventually that weight becomes impossible to carry. That's why I'm speaking now. Because some truths deserve freedom. Some feelings deserve air. Some connections deserve honesty. And some people deserve to know how deeply they have impacted another human being. You are one of those people. You changed things. Maybe without realizing it. Maybe without intending to. But you did. You changed the way I see trust. You changed the way I see hope. You changed the way I see the future. And that's exactly why this next part matters. Because there's one final thing you should know. The biggest secret of all. The thing I've never admitted out loud. I spent so much time worrying about losing you, that I almost lost myself. Think about that. How many people spend years protecting themselves from heartbreak, only to end up breaking their own hearts? How many people stay silent because they're afraid? How many opportunities disappear because nobody was brave enough to speak? I almost became one of those people. Almost. But not anymore. Because life is too short for almost. Too short for maybes. Too short for unfinished stories. Too short for feelings buried beneath fear. And that's why these words matter. Not because they guarantee an outcome. Not because they promise a perfect ending. But because they are true. And truth has power. The power to heal. The power to transform. The power to change lives. So if you've stayed this far, hear this carefully. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes love is patient. Sometimes love waits. Sometimes love grows quietly in the background while life distracts us with everything else. Sometimes love survives seasons it was never supposed to survive. And sometimes, after all the confusion, after all the uncertainty, after all the fear, love finally finds its voice. This is that voice. This is that moment. This is that truth. I love you. But there's something you should know. The secret was never that I had flaws. The secret was never that I was afraid. The secret was never that I carried scars. The secret is that despite all of those things, despite every obstacle, despite every setback, despite every reason to walk away, I never stopped choosing you in my heart. Not once. And maybe that's the most shocking truth of all. Because people change. Circumstances change. Years change. Entire lives change. Yet somehow, some connections continue. Quietly. Faithfully. Unexplainably. Like a light that refuses to go out. No matter how strong the wind becomes. And if you're hearing these words today, maybe there's a reason. Maybe you needed a reminder that genuine feelings still exist. Maybe you needed proof that honesty still matters. Maybe you needed to remember that some truths are worth risking everything for. Or maybe, just maybe, you needed to hear the words someone has been carrying for far too long. I love you. And now you know. Every fear. Every scar. Every hidden truth. Every unspoken feeling. Every silent battle. Every reason. Every hope. Every dream. Nothing hidden. Nothing disguised. Nothing left unsaid. Just the truth. And sometimes, the truth changes everything. The strange thing about truth is that once it is spoken, it begins to reveal other truths hiding behind it. And after everything I have just confessed, after every wall has fallen, after every secret has been brought into the light, there is still one question hanging in the air. What happens now? Most people think this is the moment where the story ends. The confession is made. The truth is revealed. The feelings are exposed. Fade to black. Roll the credits. But real life doesn't work that way. Real life begins where certainty ends. And that's exactly where we are now. Because loving someone is one thing. Standing in front of that love without knowing what comes next is something completely different. For a long time, I imagined this moment. I imagined what I would say. I imagined how you might react. I imagined every possible outcome. The happy ones. The heartbreaking ones. The impossible ones. But there was one possibility I never considered. The possibility that the truth itself would change me. Because it already has. The moment I stopped hiding my feelings, something unexpected happened. The fear started losing its power. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But slowly. Like darkness disappearing when morning arrives. You see, fear survives in secrecy. It grows stronger in silence. It becomes larger in imagination. But once exposed to the light, it begins to shrink. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt free. Not because I knew what the future held, but because I finally stopped carrying the weight of pretending. Pretending is exhausting. Pretending you don't care. Pretending you're fine. Pretending someone's absence doesn't affect you. Pretending your heart isn't waiting for something. Pretending your soul isn't searching for answers. The truth is, every time I heard your name, something inside me paid attention. Every single time. Every message. Every conversation. Every memory. Every unexpected reminder. It all mattered more than I ever admitted. And maybe that's why this story is different. Because it isn't about perfection. It's about significance. Some people enter your life and leave footprints. Others leave scars. But a very small number leave something else entirely. They leave transformation. They change the way you think. The way you feel. The way you dream. The way you see yourself. You were one of those people. Long before I understood what was happening. Long before I had words for it. You were changing me. And here's what nobody tells you about being changed by someone. Once it happens, you can never return to who you were before. That's the shocking part. Not the confession. Not the feelings. Not even the love. The shocking part is realizing that a single person can permanently alter your journey. Without even knowing it. There were nights when I sat alone trying to understand why. Why you? Out of all the people in the world. Why did my heart keep returning to the same place? Why did your presence feel different? Why did your absence feel louder? Why did every attempt to move on somehow lead me back to the same unanswered question? At first, I thought it was because of what you gave me. Your kindness. Your energy. Your attention. But eventually I realized something deeper. It wasn't what you gave me. It was what you awakened in me. Hope. The kind of hope I thought I had lost. The kind of hope that survives disappointment. The kind of hope that refuses to die. And once hope wakes up, everything changes. Because hope is dangerous. Hope makes you believe. Hope makes you try. Hope makes you risk. Hope makes you vulnerable. And vulnerability is terrifying. Especially when you've spent years protecting yourself. Especially when you've learned to expect disappointment. Especially when you've convinced yourself that wanting less is safer. I became very good at wanting less. Less expectation. Less attachment. Less dreaming. Less believing. It felt safer that way. But safe isn't always alive. Sometimes safe is just another word for stuck. And I was stuck. Until you arrived. Then suddenly everything I had buried started coming back. The dreams. The possibilities. The feelings. The future. And that's when I understood something life-changing. The heart doesn't stop wanting because it's afraid. It simply waits. It waits for the right reason. The right person. The right moment. The right truth. And maybe this is that truth. Maybe this is the moment everything finally makes sense. Or maybe it's only the beginning. Because there is another secret. One I have never shared with anyone. There were times when I thought I had missed my chance. Times when I believed life had already made its decision. Times when I looked at the distance between us and thought, it's over. Not because the feelings disappeared. Because the obstacles felt bigger. And obstacles have a way of convincing us that impossible means permanent. But impossible and permanent are not the same thing. Not even close. Some of the greatest stories ever lived looked impossible before they happened. Some of the strongest connections survived things that should have destroyed them. Some of the most beautiful endings began as impossible beginnings. And maybe that's why I never completely gave up. Because something inside me refused to believe the story was over. No matter how much time passed. No matter how many doubts appeared. No matter how many reasons I found to walk away. A quiet voice kept saying, wait. Not forever. Not blindly. Just long enough for the truth to reveal itself. And that's exactly what happened. The truth revealed itself. Not in one dramatic moment. Not through a miracle. But through hundreds of small realizations. The realization that genuine feelings don't disappear simply because they're inconvenient. The realization that some people matter regardless of circumstances. The realization that love is not measured by how easy it is. It's measured by how much remains after everything difficult arrives. And so much remained. More than I expected. More than I wanted. More than I could explain. Until eventually explanation became unnecessary. Because some truths are felt before they are understood. And this is one of them. I don't know exactly what tomorrow looks like. I don't know how every chapter unfolds. I don't know what challenges wait ahead. Nobody does. But I know this. If there is one thing stronger than fear, it is honesty. If there is one thing stronger than doubt, it is truth. And if there is one thing stronger than distance, it is a connection that refuses to disappear. Maybe that's why you're still here. Maybe that's why these words found you. Maybe that's why this story feels strangely familiar. Because somewhere deep inside, you already know. The most important things in life are rarely the easiest. The most meaningful connections are rarely the simplest. The greatest truths are rarely the most comfortable. But they are worth it. Every risk. Every fear. Every uncertain step. Worth it. And now that everything has been said. Now that every secret stands exposed. Now that there is nowhere left to hide. I feel something I haven't felt in a very long time. Peace. Not because every question has been answered. But because the truth no longer lives in silence. And maybe that was the real purpose of all this. Not to create an ending. To create a beginning. A beginning built on honesty. A beginning built on courage. A beginning built on everything that was once left unsaid. Because the greatest tragedy isn't loving someone. The greatest tragedy is never allowing that love to speak. I almost made that mistake. Almost. But not anymore. Now the truth belongs to the world. Now the secret is free. Now the silence is broken. And if there is one final thing you should know. One final revelation before this chapter closes. It's this. No matter how uncertain life becomes. No matter how complicated the journey gets. No matter how many storms arrive. The feelings I spoke about were never temporary. They were never an accident. They were never a passing moment. They were real from the beginning. They are real now. And perhaps they always will be. Because some people enter your life for a season. Some for a lesson. Some for a memory. But a rare few become part of your story forever. And when that happens, you never truly forget them. You carry them with you. Across years. Across distances. Across changing circumstances. Across entire lifetimes of growth. Quietly. Faithfully. Endlessly. And that was the something you should know.